Hey everybody, how's it going? So this is the beginning of our animation tutorials. So we'll basically use the same ones that we cut out in Photoshop, and we'll just start with the skater. We already have everything separated in layers, of course, just like we want it, and so we'll just talk about the tools that we're going to use to make this happen, and kind of some of the techniques, especially when it comes to handling shadows and whatnot. So I'll go ahead and open this up in After Effects. So I'll just make a new composition, new project here. Just skip that one altogether. And here we go. We'll go ahead and import the skater bid that we want, the one that we were working with. I think I left on my skater cutout. Make sure you import it as a composition, not as a footage. Go ahead and hit import, and you should be good to go. Okay, so here's our folder. Our composition came in, and what's nice about After Effects is that it'll bring in the composition at the same size as your Photoshop file. So here, this is 3000 by 2000 pixels, which is good enough for us. So we'll just start working on this one. Once you have it in, go ahead and give it a name, save it somewhere important. We'll just call this Skater 02. And then we'll get cooking. Alright, so skater part, pretty simple. We kind of already know where this motion is going to go. So the skater and the shadow should kind of like be moving together. The front bowl and the back bowl are going to have a little bit of motion. So the back bowl, maybe we just have it drift a little bit. I've been building 5 to 7 second animations, so I'll just go with 6 seconds here. I'll have the bowl maybe move that much. I'll have the front bowl, maybe move a little further than that, like maybe double, maybe triple, maybe a little more. I'll go ahead and drop the front bowl, the back bowl position slightly, so that we always make sure we have overlapping plates there, and you can see that we get that kind of like that parallax motion. Feels pretty good. Alright, nice. Now let's get the skater going along. Most of the time I like to kind of get the position and the rotation of what I'm doing. Here the skater and the shadow are on separate plates. What I want to do is probably like get the skater's moment of rotation somewhere around here. I'll just turn off the shadow for now. And then what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and have him skate along the bowl a little bit. So I'll start with the position here. And we don't have to worry too much about keyframes or anything. It feels like plenty of movement. Anything more than that might be a little extreme, but we'll see that when we finally put this together. I'll give this a little arc right there. You kind of just see how that motion goes. This feels a little much, right? It feels a little, so maybe half that motion is all we really need. This arc feels a little extreme. That's not bad. And then we can adjust the rotation slightly as well. So maybe here, just a couple degrees, right? Just getting a little downturn to match the arc. Okay, this is pretty good as far as like slow motion is concerned. And this is the parallax part of it, right? This is just the motion that's happening dynamically between the camera and the plates. I think that works pretty good. One thing that we can do is we can go ahead and take this shadow. And I know we talked about using the pick whip here. to sort of like take this to where it's supposed to belong. So like if I pick whip this to the skater position, you'll see that it kind of throws it way off, right? But that's okay. You can adjust this back to where it belongs again by just simply adjusting the anchor point here in the properties. The animatable properties. So this is pretty good. Right, so now this shadow will move along with it. And anything that we do from this point on with the shadow, we can kind of make that work. And as far as compositing the shadow is concerned, let me kind of talk you through that too. What you'll want to do is go to Effect, Color Correction, and just go down to Hue Saturation. This is a really flexible little tool. If those of you are familiar with it in Photoshop, kind of know how it works. Basically, what we want to do is just take the lightness down all the way to black, and then we'll set the blending mode to like multiply, and then the opacity we'll take it down so that it kind of feels more excuse me, like a shadow. So that feels pretty good. We might blur this up a little bit. Again, remember we cut it out super clean, so sometimes blurring it a little bit. And Fastbox or Gaussian blur are usually two good ones to use. So I'm just going to blur this shadow slightly, so it doesn't feel as crisp as maybe our image would have portrayed. And it feels a little bit more natural of a shadow. And we can talk about the motion of the shadow in just a little bit. So here we are. We're having the skater move along. He feels pretty good. But let's add a little bit of dynamism to the skater, okay? That his arms or whatever's happening, let's kind of like make this work a little bit better. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a tool called the Puppet Pin tool. And it's just right up here, Puppet Position Pin tool. You see there's a few options underneath it. For right now, let's just use the Puppet Position Pin tool. This creates a mesh that allows us to sort of manipulate cut out layers. So what I want to do is kind of like pin down the edge of the board and probably his back, and then his upper back, and then maybe his shoulder out to his fingertips, shoulder to fingertips, and then maybe like his neck and then his head up here. So you can see we get a little bit of this. Now we want to be careful that you're not getting too much. You see how this is pulling down the other arm? We don't really want that to happen. So we do have to be careful that we're not getting too much play out of other elements. So what you can do is just sort of like hit this and leave it as a static tool. So you can see you can get a little bit more leeway out of here with the split. So we're not going to go too crazy with the motion anyways. But once you set these puppet pins, you'll notice that if you hit U on your layer, which reveals all your current keyframes, you'll see all these keyframes are here for us to use. So maybe what I'll do is I'll start with this one back a little bit, and his head maybe up a little bit. That's not bad. And then maybe his hand here down a little bit. You don't want to get too squiggly with it. And then maybe we'll start with him kind of back a little here. Don't skew the board too much. And then as he comes forward, maybe we'll have him kind of look like he's shifting his weight forward slightly. Maybe have this arm come up a little bit. Not too much. Remember, we don't need a ton of dynamic motion. Maybe this arm also is kind of finishing up a little bit here. And then his head can maybe go down slightly. So just watch out that you're not warping this too much. And sometimes when you get a sense of what's happening, you get a watch it down. You get a feel for like, okay, how's this really working out? Does it feel natural? Does it look right? And you may get a sense of like too much warping going on or something like that. And if that's the case, then you'll definitely want to make some adjustments, and you can do that with the puppet pin tool. It doesn't feel too bad. We could probably get more dynamic with one of the arms and even the head a little bit. So let's bring this arm up a little bit more. Bring the head down a little bit more. And that's right, we're just going to adjust this so it doesn't get too warped, but you can kind of see what we're working with here. And maybe this will come up a little bit. We can have this hand come down a little bit more. Maybe some of this motion. We can feel like he's really transferring his weight to the front of the board a little bit. And that's not bad. So if we look at kind of like the beginning and end positions, you can kind of see like where we're headed, right? Kind of what we can kind of do. And we may want to manipulate this more or less as we go along. We'll let this RAM preview and kind of see how it goes once it hits top speed again. And I bet we could get even more dynamic with what's happening with his back, bottom of the board, I think. I mean, we don't want to get too crazy. Oops, we could probably kind of shift his weight even more. You can see we're getting a little bit of warping, like we don't want it to go too crazy, especially when we're trying to keep the board straight. But you know, it's possible that we can kind of stretch this out or even back a little bit as well. So we can kind of play with it without trying to get too warpy with everything, to maybe make the motion feel like a little more twisty and a little more dynamic. And maybe we start this back a little bit more as well. Start this one forward. So we're getting a shift of like kind of the center point of reference there on the body. Again, you don't want to go crazy, but this feels pretty good. So here's our full resolution pin, right? We got 3000 by 2000 pixels worth of like skater here. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to prep this for 1920 by 1080. So after like everything's said and done, and you're happy with the way your animation is going, you're going to really need to make sure that you're getting this prepped for the right style of video release. So basically what you're going to do is, you know, maybe we can do something else with this shadow actually. Sorry, I'm going to take a little tangent here. Let me show you this other little trick that we kind of talked about. There's one that's under distort, and there's one that's called corner pin. There's one also CC power pin. They're both great. They both kind of do the same thing. I use the power pin one because I can kind of manipulate and skew this kind of like how I'd like. So this isn't bad. And what I'll do is I'll just adjust this anchor accordingly. To sort of like make sure it matches up with the wheels again. And again, that feels pretty good. It's close enough. So what I'll do is, with all of these, like these top left, top right, bottom, I'll make sure I set some keyframes. I'll go ahead and keyframe the anchor point as well, and let's go all the way to the end. And maybe what I'll do with this is I'll get a little bit of like skew on the shadow. Just to see if maybe we can get a little bit more perspective on it, so that it feels like it's kind of stretching a little bit. You know, nothing crazy. Just so that it feels like it's being left behind a little bit. We kind of adjusted this a little bit. And then we can just make sure the anchor point kind of goes back to where it belongs. It's okay if it overlaps underneath the board. we're just trying to get a feel for like that the shadow is like kind of warping along with the bowl a little bit, while at the same time still like maintaining contact with the wheels. So just that little bit of skew right there totally works out. So yeah, let's kind of take a look at that. Hit Control S or Command S to save it now that we've done all this work. And then we'll get a sense of how it goes. That feels pretty good for slow motion. We're getting a lot of like shift in the body, which feels nice. A little bit of perspective change. The bowl and the back plate are moving along, pretty nicely. So I think we can live with that. But now let's get it prepped. So what I'm going to do is hit Control N. Maybe I'll just call this like Skater Resize. 1920 by 1080, same frame rate. I guess we can make it 6 seconds long since that's what we're doing. And that'll be that. So hit OK. And then we'll go back to Project and go ahead and bring in our skater cutout. And you'll notice that it's much larger than what we need it to be. So we'll scale this down to the right size. So that we're not seeing any like background stuff. And then kind of get the skater to go where the crop needs to happen. So let's just see what this crop does for us. We might see a little bit of green here coming up. Yeah, a little too much, right? So we can see we can scale this up a little bit. Kind of reposition it here. That's not bad. So you can see we lost a little bit of the shadow, and that's okay. We got the skater all the way in there. The motion feels pretty good. And this is ready for rendering out at 1920 by 1080. Okay, pretty good, piece of cake. So yeah, that one's pretty straightforward, right? We did a good job of cutting everything out. You can see, maybe a little warpy with the body, but you know what? It's all right. This happens slow motion, so kind of that sense of warping is probably going to be okay. So I wouldn't get too hung up on it if it feels like when it goes full speed that it's like too warpy, but this will do. Okay, nice. End of session 1. I'll go ahead and do a couple more videos now for the bird cutout and then also our butterfly cutout. So we'll see you on tutorial 2 for animation in just a sec.